So I wanted to do a quick video, just sort of reviewing, if you will, the Power of Now, and sort of explaining a little story about like how I came into contact with it initially. And it was sort of the beginning of being interested in spirituality, if you will. Um, it's funny when I'm saying like being interested in spirituality. I'm always aware that the words never quite are accurate because it kind of conjures up an image of someone who, doesn't shave and sits there and never goes out and just meditates consistently. But of course, I think it's becoming more. Me and my friend were having a talk about this the other day. Sort of mindfulness it's generally known as mindfulness now, even though that term it's kind of the opposite of what it means. It's about your mind being empty. But I think it's coming into the fray a bit more in the world. I think people are getting more and more bogged down with the pressures of the world, and mindfulness, spirituality is becoming a necessary alternative for people. I went through a bad time, like all people do at some point in their lives. It's the only reason it's not the only reason we're here, but there wouldn't really be any point without struggle, challenge. No point going into detail on the ins and outs of it. There is a video on this channel about it, but it was a particularly bad time for me. I was totally lost. Like, just, it was after the breakup of a family and all that kind of thing, and was drinking heavily. Wasn't looking after myself very well. Feeling down. Wasn't eating well. Just generally lost. I think my friend. I went round to see a friend one week, and he actually said I looked like a broken man, which I kind of laugh a little bit about now, but it was an accurate description. It's many years ago. And on one Sunday afternoon when I was very down and bored, nothing to do, and I went to a nearby town for a little walk round and went into the local bookstore, which is called Waterstones. And right there was the blue copy of The Power of Now on the shelf. It's international bestseller written at the top, and then it's got a blue cover with like a white sun. So it's just like blue and white. And it just caught me attention. I'd already read. I've been introduced a little bit to that type of thing. I'd already read The Secret that my friend had borrowed me, and that sort of just hit home the importance of positive thinking. But that wasn't really, The Secret's not really about going deep. It's just about, well, we don't need to get into that, but that was about positive thinking, but not really much else. So what happened then was I read the book. Well, I read the book and it didn't really connect with me. I didn't pick it up again for some time, and then I was at work one day and it was a bit quiet, and I picked the book up and something connected with me immediately. And it was the line, I remember rereading again, "You are not your mind." And I just couldn't stop after that. And I was reading it, and it was like just a breakthrough. It made me realise virtually all of my problems in life, or what I perceived as problems, all of my struggles and heartaches and what you will, were all due to the same problem, largely, in that I totally identified with my mind. I didn't see a difference between my mind and who I am. And that was like a major breakthrough. I remember even that evening I acted differently I would have done the previous night. Now I was on a bit of a high, and that high eventually went down, and obviously the formalities of normal life come into existence. But it's never gone away. And something happens when I read the book. Every word is the truth. And it's like that with all true spiritual teachings. You don't question it, and in any way. You don't doubt it. You know every word is the truth. And I think the reason that happens is because there's a part of you deep down that recognises that truth. It's like yourself speaking to yourself. It's like Eckhart says in a lot of his teachings. The teaching and the taught are one. So in other words, you can't really have a teacher without the student. I remember repeatedly listening to the audiobook for weeks and weeks, and then listening to his some of his talks, which I think I have one of his talks on, or at least a track. I have hundreds of them on my iTunes, and at some point, when I'm selecting random songs, one of his tracks will come on, and it's like a nice reminder. But with regard to the book, the things that hit home, that kind of stood out and made me realise how insufficiently I was living, but not to try. It did go as like there was a bit of a negative side effect of it. I sort of punished myself for living so unconsciously, because the troubles, the strife that I was going through, I still needed to deal with, but I don't believe I would have dealt with it at all without these teachings. I don't think I would have recovered. Surrender was a huge thing, just such a simple thing like accepting what is, but it's so alien to how I was living. It was like it was a revolution. It was a revelation. Every aspect really of the whole book, and the pain body. I mean, that's for anybody that's listening to this that hasn't read the book. I think the three things that are sort of revolutionary is the pain body, and that's the accumulation of all unresolved pain in you that lives on. My pain body was huge, and it still is now, but I know how to manage it better, and I'm aware of it when it comes. That was massive. That made me realise there was nothing wrong with me. I used to think there was something inherently wrong with who I was as a person, and I lived with that all my life until I read that. And then I realised that's not who I am. That's caused by not placing blame on other people. Of course, it's caused by the world that we live in. There is a deeper meaning behind it, so you should never play the victim. But to realise that those bad feelings that I had and the way I acted was because of the unresolved past, the pain that we feel, that we don't fully accept, that lives with you and stays with you, and that's what the pain body is. And that was just so huge. And I remember saying to a friend, and she was like, "Well, what have you been doing wrong?" I said, "Well, I've been living through my pain," and it was so true to some extent. And it's just so amazing. And when you see people reacting in a certain way, behaving unconsciously, and it's their pain body, so that's when true forgiveness arises. If you try to forgive, you can't. Forgiveness happens automatically when you understand why people behave a certain way. So that was absolutely key. I mean, even thinking about it now, it just kind of it's a little bit sad as well, because the important things that we're not taught as children, how much of a society of ignorance we are in the more basic parts of living. Of course, that's what religion's supposed to be, but it isn't. I remember I went to a very religious primary school, which is the first school you attend. I think, is it called grade school in the US? I'm not sure. And we were made to recite the Lord's Prayer over and over again. I didn't have a clue what any of that meant. It was just brainwashing. There was no essence behind what we were doing or what we were being taught. But this kind of made me realise that what the teachings of Christianity, I was a Christian school, was supposed to be. And I even remember getting split up from a friend because he went to he went to a Catholic school and I went to a Protestant school, and I was just thinking about that now. I was like, what a ridiculous thing, you know. So yeah, that the pain body is just, it's massive. In realizing it's the difference between pain and suffering. I think if you can accept pain and deal with it consciously, it won't turn into suffering. But that's not easy to do because we're not used to living that way. And yeah, so I think the three things that struck home with me were: you are not your mind, which made me disidentify it, made me appreciate the true me. Hearing about the pain body, learning about that, and the act of surrender. And surrender's huge, and it's something we have to practice, and it's little things, and it can go from little things to big things. Little things from, you know, not getting angry when you spill milk on the floor in the morning, to accepting a family member who may have hurt you really badly when you were younger, and accepting that, accepting massive trauma that happened to you when you were a child. So it can go, and non-surrender is futile in both cases. What's the point? But sometimes you can. What I found is sometimes you can want to surrender and accept what's happened, but you don't know how, because something is so strong and so prevalent in your life, you don't know how to let go. And I think that can only come through time and the ongoing practice. Another thing that I fell into a little bit was getting too caught up in spirituality and mindfulness and Eckhart teachings. You've got to, I see it with some people. I see it with people online. I see it with meditation groups I've been to. People get caught up in mindfulness too much, and it becomes too much a part of their lives, in that they have a concept of themselves as a spiritual person rather than realising its true essence. You must be so careful that the ego doesn't come in through the back door and makes you superior because you're spiritual and other people are not. And it's like, my mate who's not, you know, a friend of mine who's never read a spiritual book in his life is the most enlightened person I've ever met. He doesn't know who Eckhart Tolle is. Never read the Bible. It's just the way he's been brought up, the life he's led. He's a gardener, so he does like a simple job, works with nature every day, something real, so it's kind of moulded him a little bit. But that's just to say, just because you don't read spiritual books or practice meditation, that you're not enlightened. So that was something that's something that you really have to be careful about. It's like, you know, if you see somebody behaving a certain way and you think, well, they're not spiritual, well, that's, you know, this is just another way, isn't it? You know, mindfulness, it's a bit of a paradox, really. I know that it's the only way to exist, to appreciate your inner self, but yet there's a different path to it. Even the murderer will eventually really reach enlightenment. It's like the stories about people on death row who achieve enlightenment. You know, there's a book about it. I think is it Righting My Wrongs? I think it. I don't think it was on death row, but it's a book that Oprah Winfrey talked about, when a guy who was in prison for very serious kind of crimes and sort of found enlightenment. I've not started reading it yet, but yeah, I mean, The Power of Now was the catalyst, and that led me on to other books as well. I mean, this is, but you know, every now and again when I'm feeling a bit lost and I fall off the wagon, so to speak, because I do, it's a bit of a funny one, because I'm not fully enlightened, obviously, but to say that is a bit wrong as well, because we are fully enlightened, all of us, and it's when you realise you are that you become that way. Yeah, it's a funny one. I remember a friend of mine once. I was talking to him about this meditation group, and I was going to. He said, "I'm sorry to piss on your red parade, pal, but there's no God, there's no afterlife. It's all bollocks." And I went, and you just have to said that's fine. That's your view. I didn't get angry or anything, because some people might be like a bit inclined to go, "You can't talk that way," blah 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 blah. But of course, it doesn't really matter what someone's beliefs are. It's about how you live. I always say this. I think that the only thing that matters are being true to yourself and being kind to other people. And I think if you get those right, you're onto something. Everybody's path's different, but I'm glad. It's kind of like destiny, really. I think if I hadn't to pick this book up whenever I did, I think I was kind of meant to. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. If you can, please leave any comments and let me know your experiences with it. And subscribe if you're not already. I'd appreciate it, and I'll speak to you soon.